What does 1930s Nazi Germany and the 2020 COVID pandemic have in common? When viewed through the lens of cleanliness versus contamination, these two periods in history share shocking similarities. In 1935, Nazi Germany enacted the Nuremberg Laws, which was legislation that institutionalized segregation and discrimination against people deemed unclean. During the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, legislation was enacted that institutionalized segregation against those deemed a risk of contamination. Both can be examined through the framework of perceived cleanliness, where separation was justified by notions of purity or hygiene. Both policies mandated physical and social barriers between groups or individuals. The separation was justified by protecting a clean or superior collective from perceived threats. The Nuremberg laws prohibited proximity between Jews, African Americans, disabled individuals, amongst others, and those labeled non-Jews to prevent contamination of the Aryan race. In similar vein, social distancing enforced separation and physical barriers to limit contamination risks. The arrival of the COVID-19 vaccine introduced a new layer of societal division. Policies and public messaging increasingly differentiated people based on whether they were vaccinated, often framing the unvaccinated as posing an ongoing danger to the broader community and justifying restrictions, oppression, and exclusion. Nazi ideology framed Jews as unclean or alien, threatening a national body's purity, leading to segregation via hygiene policies. Similarly, the COVID-19 social distancing drew parallels through notions of cleanliness, where separation evokes discrimination against perceived unclean groups. Terms like social distancing unconsciously reinforced ideas of shaming or excluding those deemed dirty or risky to sanitation-based hierarchies. The Nuremberg laws explicitly prohibited everyday proximity, such as shared public spaces like benches, schools, or theaters between Jews, homosexuals, African Americans, disabled individuals, and non-Jews. This was framed as necessary to prevent contamination or defilement, all rooted in pseudoscientific eugenics that portrayed Jewish presence as a threat to German purity. Anti-Semitic print media, radio, and television broadcasts helped fuel public perception of those labeled as a contamination risk. In a disturbing parallel, COVID-19 social distancing enforced physical barriers such as the widely promoted pseudoscientific 6-foot or 2-meter rule, capacity limits in public spaces, closures of gatherings, closures of venues, and isolation of those potentially contaminated. These measures separated the healthy from those viewed as infected or contamination risks, creating strict divisions in daily life to safeguard a perceived superior group. In both cases, separation was justified as protecting a clean or pure collective from external threats, turning proximity itself into danger. Both the Nuremberg laws and social distancing used fear as a base for the propaganda that was the cornerstone of their ideologies. This multi-channel saturation, print for the explicit hate, radio for mass reach, film for emotional impact, education for permanence, and social media during the pandemic, normalized discrimination and created indifference to persecution. Though not everybody followed the Nuremberg laws or the social distance mandates, the pervasive distribution fostered widespread complicity and passive acceptance. Through radio, television, film, print media, and the education system, Nazi Germany was able to build acceptance for discrimination and violence towards the perceived threat. In similar fashion, the 2020 pandemic built acceptance for discrimination through the use of social media and the internet, as well as the other media outlets used by Nazi Germany. In the shadow of swastikas and COVID masks, two eras whispered the same ancient lie, that perceived purity demands obedience, that those labeled unclean must be walled away, once by racial decree, once by viral fear, yet both turn proximity into peril, fear into fracture, and the breath of one into the threat of many, reminding us how swiftly the language of cleanliness can become the architecture of oppression and exclusion. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.